Good afternoon, students. This is Mr. Rizat. Today we're going to go deeper into value drawing, and we're going to break it down into specific tools on how to do it. Because, after all, there is a method to the madness. Any drawing that you see that looks realistic, if you learn the techniques, you'll be able to look at it and take it apart piece by piece and study the finished product and see how the artist got to it. So, the secret to that, though, is knowing the techniques ahead of time. So let's start with the most basic one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this frayer here and then show you some examples and then demo in front of you how to do this technique. This is the most basic shading technique there is, and it's called hatching. You can hatch in order to get lots of darks and lights. You can even hatch to draw forms and shapes without actually using lines. Go ahead and look. See this ribbon-looking shape? There are no lines in there besides the hatches themselves. On the outside edges of the ribbon, no lines whatsoever. You can draw using shading techniques, and it's a really cool design effect. It's also the secret to drawing realistically. But we'll get into that a little bit further. For now, I just want you to focus on the technique. Hatching is a technique that's used for three main reasons. First of all, shading. Second, texture. And third, defining a form. Shading, if you've taken an art class ahead of time, you already know what that is. That's just making something look 3D based on a light source. And you've already learned a light source, so you're already pretty well on track to learning how to make things look real. Second, it's for texture. Texture is making something look as if it has a surface that's different than being just simply smooth. For example, fur, or sandy textures, or rough rocky textures, and so on. You use your different shading techniques, like hatching, in order to achieve that. What hatching is several lines side by side. That's it. Now, these lines can be short, they can be long, they can be thick, thin, they could be bunched up in one little area, they could be spread out, separated apart. There's all sorts of different ways to hatch, but there's one consistent piece to hatching as well as with any other shading technique that you must know before diving into it. It's very important that your strokes are small. And when I say small, I don't mean itty-bitty, teeny-tiny. I mean typically no larger than an inch in length. An inch being, about that long. The reason why, you lose control and your lines get all wobbly and stuff. Hatching is one of the most basic techniques, but in my opinion, it's one of the most difficult to master. The reason why is because of seams. Seams, like sewing seams. When you're laying down a whole block of texture, you want to hide your seams, and if you're only doing small strokes, that means you do one little area and then an area next to it and next to it and next to it, kind of like you're painting down value on top of it using that technique. And the thing is your strokes like to overlap at times, and getting really good at hatching involves getting to the point where they don't overlap, they meet right at the tips. So that's one of the parts about hatching. Also, hatching is one of the best ways to draw fur. All you do is you hatch instead of hatching all the same direction, you hatch the direction the fur goes, and that's how you do hair and fur and so on. This is a picture from Easter Bunny Rampage. There are parts of this picture where hatching is used for shading, hatching is used for texture, and hatching is used for defining a form. Let's look at, first of all, for shading. Let's look at the Easter basket here that this crazy bunny has. And oh my gosh, look what's in the basket. Tiny little people. Yeah, pretty creepy. It's not because he has tiny people, it's because it's a picture of a bunny rabbit that's like 10 stories tall, which you'll see in later screencasts. In your pieces, when you hatch, try to have your strokes going the same direction. It looks cleaner, it looks nicer. Unless it's going over, say, a form that's in 3D, which you'll see here, which moves us on to our next area, texture. Right here, this is where hatching was used to give the illusion of texture. How did I do it? Well, rabbits don't have very long fur. So that means your strokes, if you're going to draw rabbit fur, is going to be short. Your strokes are going to be very short. So all I did was I just went over it once, all the way up here, very lightly, and I went over it a second time, up to about here. And I went over it a third time. And by layering over the top, some of those strokes did this. They went to the side and overlapped in some areas, and some areas they didn't, and it made it look natural. Also, over here, let's look at the rabbit's ear. His fur is going this way, kind of north, so my hatch strokes went north. Let's look down here at under his cheek. His fur is going kind of south and to the west, so my hatch strokes went south and to the west. It's just a method of getting texture. So let's look at the third piece, defining the form. Now you all know how to draw with lines, contour lines. And for example, right here on the outside of the bridge of the rabbit's nose, that's a contour line. But look what happens over here. Oh my gosh, what kind of a line is that? That's crazy. Well, it's not a contour line that you could just up and easily trace. What that is hatching. Now let's get a little bit closer in here. There's several strokes going the direction that the fur is going. You can actually use small hatching strokes to define a form without using contour lines. It looks really cool. It made it look a little bit more real. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. That's what we're going to talk about a little bit later in future screencasts. Let's look at some non-examples. Here's what hatching is not. For starters, a common beginner mistake is that beginning artists hatch in zigzags, almost like doing a Zorro, a letter Z. Ugh, it's nasty. Hatching is not zigzags. Hatching is individual strokes, meaning I'm picking my pencil up every single time I make a stroke. I don't have my pencil on the ground touching the whole time. I actually stroke, 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 kind of like you're taking a samurai sword and cutting slashes in the sand. They're individual strokes. And zigzags is not hatching. The reason why is because there's less control and your hatching is going to overlap and you'll get these really nasty seams. I really don't recommend that you do it. Here's another example of what hatching is not, right down here in the bottom left. As you can see, we've got several different strokes. Some are very thin, some are very thick, some are very short, some are very long. Now after you've achieved control and learned how to do it, and you're really starting to master the use of that pencil, then I'd recommend doing this. But as beginners, notice how there's a major lack of control. Some areas go to the left and the right, and they're uneven, and it's just sloppy. Try to avoid that. If you want really good hatching, move your pencil very quickly. Rather than making slow strokes, make quick ones. And that'll help your strokes naturally look straighter. All right, and finally, the other large mistake that I see beginners make is that they make their strokes too long. The reason for why you don't do that, you lose control. Again, you'll start with, see, our wrist is built on a fulcrum. And after drawing a line, there's a point where we start to lose control because our wrist is built around a curve. And if that happens, our strokes start to curve and things start to wobble. Just try to draw a straight line without moving your arm, using only your wrist and your fingers. It starts to get really hard after a while. So the main reason is for control. And another reason is for craftsmanship. Your piece looks tighter and cleaner and crisper if you have shorter strokes, no larger than an inch. Granted, it does take longer, but it teaches you patience and it teaches you the process of creating art. Look on any speed demo drawing on YouTube, you'll see anytime there's hatching, those strokes are tiny and they go in there and they're no larger than an inch. People who know what they're doing have short strokes when they're hatching. People who want to take shortcuts and rush and they zigzag, they use large strokes because they want to cover the area really fast. They want to get it done and over with. I definitely don't recommend doing that. It makes your piece look really cruddy and it'll definitely cost you points on your assignment. So let's take a look at some examples. I'm just going to demo a couple of different techniques here in front of you. Different ways to hatch. I'm going to be using this drawing tablet and it's kind of unnatural to me right now. So let's see how it turns out. Well, for starters, you could all hatch one direction, meaning if you're going to be shading something, keep your hatch strokes going the same way. And this is what I was talking about a seam right here. It's very hard to get rid of that seam. The only people I've seen who are unable to, who actually can do some shading without that seam are people who've been doing pen and ink for a long time for shading. The main way to get rid of that seam is mainly through layering. So if I wanted to make a value going from like a light gray to a little bit darker, I just go in and I hatch another layer over the top of it. And what you do is, as you shade with hatching, you just keep building up layers and building up layers and building up layers and try to make it look even. And like this area right here, I might want to go in and just kind of add more values to it in order to even it out a little bit. And you just kind of keep working the area until it starts to blend together. Get it nice and light. So if I were to use hatching to define the form here, this is how I would do it. When you draw fur, it usually doesn't go straight out. It usually follows the angle of the surface. So if the paw is round, it's going to kind of go at an angle out there. All we do is we do individual strokes, tight and close together, and small, because once again, the fur is small too. I could show you how to do like big shaggy animals too if you want. And then we go in and I'm hatching the direction that the fur would go. And now, turn that off, I've just used hatching to draw and define the outside of the form rather than just using, boring straight lines. You see? So how would we use hatching to give texture? Well, your hatching strokes would have to go the direction that the fur is going. So if my fur is going at an angle like this, up and say, like in this area, up to say 1 o'clock, and let's say our light source is up here and it's coming down at this angle, then I would have to simply go in and hatch the direction my fur is going. And just like you're mowing your lawn, like you do it in strips, or like you would paint a wall in strips, do the same thing with your shading, right? And so we know there'd be like a cast shadow on this dark area between the paws, so I'm going to go in and I'll layer another little dark area in there. And let's give it more value. I'm going to do a little darker area in there too, make multiple passes. So, and tell you what, let's give some texture right up in here too. This is a little bit too white, so I'm going to do a couple little small hatches like so. And it's already starting to look kind of realistic. So over here, the fur is going at this angle, and if it's a rounded form, it's going to be poking up at us like this. And as it goes off, so I'll just hatch the direction that the fur is going. I'll do it in strips, just like mowing your lawn or painting a wall. And I would continue to do this for the entire paw, but just for the sake of time, I'm not gonna. You can go in here and darken some areas up again, give it some definition, hit it with another layer just to make it look real, and you would continue this for the whole drawing. And that way you make an entire drawing without a single contour line on it. It looks really cool. That's one of the secrets to drawing real, but we'll get deeper into that later. So I hope you found this helpful. Those are 3 of the main reasons to use hatching. It's a lot of fun. It's something that you really can zone out on and really space out. It's something that you can doodle in your notebook and get better at just by doodling. As a matter of fact, doodling is one of the major ways to improve your artistic skills. So, hope you found it helpful. I look forward to seeing you in class. And as always, feel free to rewind or pause if there's anything that you want to go over again. So, take care. Bye.